what a great success story. Congratulations
Thank you.
again. And why don't we start at the beginning? Give us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and how you started developing an interest in business and PR in particular.
Sure. So I'm a local, grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and didn't know what I wanted to do after high school, so I went into the Air Force and spent 4 years. I got trained in electronics and spent a couple years in the U.S. Some beautiful locations, Biloxi, Mississippi, and Trenton, New Jersey. I did get over to Europe for 2 years though, which was nice. And I didn't want to go to college until about my first year after I was in the Air Force, and then I wanted to go to college. But I had 3 more years to go, and I did some night school. I got out, I went to University of Maryland, I got a degree in accounting, went to work as an accountant, got pretty bored with that. This is in the mid 80s, so PCs were just coming around, and I taught myself programming so I could automate some of the stuff I was doing as an accountant. And one thing led to another, and ended up starting Vocus.
So what was the inspiration behind, what was your initial idea for Vocus? Because I know, as you know, a lot of companies sort of pivot as they grow.
Sure.
So what was your initial thesis?
Vocus, was not a kind of a traditional big idea that we had that we launched. I like to say that we were kind of bullied into almost every big decision that we made along the way. We started with software, here in the DC area, started with software that helped people do grassroots advocacy and run their political action committees. And we did that. It was kind of a lifestyle company. And we were about 5 years into it, and another company came along that wanted to buy us. And they were going to buy our company, which did government relations stuff, and put us together with a company that did public relations, or PR, and we went all the way through the acquisition process. We were gonna, I think it was about $6 million to buy the company, and did all the paperwork. We were literally at our attorney's office waiting for the wire transfer to come in, and we got a call saying the deal was off. And so,
can you identify who that buyer was?
It was a company called Burrell's.
Okay.
And
are they out of business now? Or
they're not out of business. They're pretty. I think they do traditional print clippings. Mm-hmm. So obviously a business that's
right. Why did they not close? What happened?
We never really found out the full story. But back to the notion of kind of getting bullied into different things. So we sat there at the closing table. We said, well, PR sounds like a good idea. They were going to put us together with a PR company. That sounds like a good market, so why don't we go into that? And that's really how we kind of drifted into the PR space.
Was it hard for you to sort of restart the business after you had sort of mentally checked out and that you were going to sell?
Not too hard. It was hard. I think it was harder for my wife, who had put together a book of all the places we were going to go around the world.
Right.
That book had to be shelved for a while, but we started the company though with a $32,000 loan from my co-founder's father, and we set up shop in his sister's house. Spent $300 putting up some drywall to carve out a little office for ourselves. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah. So you decided to move. So you took their idea of getting into PR.
Yeah.
And about what year was that around?
That was 97.
Okay.
So, we got into the PR space, which was really kind of the beginning of the company. And, I like to say, I've been at Vocus, or I was at Vocus for a while. I don't have my tag on anymore, but I officially left on Monday. So I'm now unemployed. But, I like to say I really ran 5 companies while we were there. So we had kind of the bootstrap lifestyle company when we were in the government relations space. Then when we started the PR business in 97, a couple years later, something called the internet and the cloud came around. And, we were pretty early into that, but, once we decided to rewrite everything for the internet and realized we were going to be in this bigger PR space, we realized we needed venture capital. So we raised our first round of venture capital in 2000. So we kind of had the lifestyle phase of from 92 to 2000. The company grew from 0 to about 5 million in revenue. We got venture capital in 2000, and we entered the venture capital stage, which was 2000 to 2005. We grew from 5 million to about 30 million. We went public in 05. We entered the public company phase, which went from 2005 till last week, when we got acquired by GTCR for $500 million. So it was really kind of 5 companies, 5 different runs in one.
So let's talk about the transition from lifestyle to institutionally backed venture. How did you think about that, and who wound up doing your deal, and how many rounds? How much did you raise? How many rounds?
We raised about 15 million. So by today's standards, not a lot of money to get the company to an IPO. And it was led by, our A round was with Edison Venture Fund, a lot of local regional VCs. Edison Venture Fund was our A round, 2 million, with a pretty low valuation. We were doing about 4 million in revenue. We got a 6 million pre-money, and I walked away from it because it was too low. And then we went on our first sales expansion, which for us at that size of the company meant, I think we hired 10 reps in various cities around the country. It was a disaster. Nobody ramped up, and we burned through all the cash that we had. And so I met back up with Edison at some event and pretended that I wasn't almost out of money. And all of a sudden,
how much cash was in the bank at the time?
I mean,
roughly, was it
0?
Really?
Like we were it was literally. Matter of fact, when we closed, we needed to close that round that week to meet payroll. So,
wow.
But I met back up, and they didn't change the valuation, but it looked a little bit better to us since we didn't have any money. And so we did it. And I mean, if you look at our history, that the 5 years from when we took venture capital and went public was probably the most productive time in the company, and probably the highest growth and the best return. So in the end, it probably didn't matter if it was a 6 million pre-money or 15 million pre-money. We put the money to good use, and it made all the difference, which I think is probably a lesson a lot of other people have learned. It also helped that I think it was about 10 months later, we did our B round at a 35 million pre-money. So it kind of all averaged out. But
right.
Lazard Technology Partners, which I think is now closed down, and Sterling Venture Partners out of Chicago were the other 2 that joined in.
And the use of funds. So you raised this money, and what were you basically using it for? And
I think it's probably the same thing most people do when you raise venture capital. It's you're typically focused on technology investing, so you're usually spending it on R&D and sales and marketing, and that's what we did as well. Continued to build out the SaaS product, and start again on a sales expansion, but with somebody else's money and a little bit smarter because of the mistakes we had made.
So you raised in 00. Was it the height of the boom, or was it post?
We closed.
Bubble
Yeah, that was
bursting?
the other. We closed right at the beginning of 2000.
So it was still hot.
So it was cooling off. So I think it was in Q1 of 00. We saw tougher times coming, which is the other reason we wanted to get it done. The company was so small, though, that from a macroeconomic and growth standpoint, it didn't really matter. We could grow from 4 million to 8 million, even in the bubble time.
Right. And that's still pretty good growth. And what was your sort of positioning strategically? What were you offering, and who was your buyer, and how did you get? Were you the first guys doing this?
We were the first ones doing it. We were disrupting a really old industry, the companies that have been around for 100 years, companies like Burrell's. But it was basically, we went from this government relations space to public relations. So we helped people build relationships with the media, monitor news coverage so they could find out what was being said about their company and their competitors and their brand, send out press releases and things like that. A lot of companies back then were just still doing things manually. And again, paper clippings were still in vogue, so people were literally getting clip books from their PR agencies. So there was a lot, it was ripe for automation, and that's really what we did from 97 through, to 2010. We went from 4 million to about 100 million in this PR space, pretty much until the down economy in 2009. We grew about 40% a year every year during that 13-year period.
Right. And along the way, you picked up some acquisitions?
We did some small acquisitions at the time. Companies that ranged from pre-revenue to 3 or 4 million in revenue. So either tuck and runs where we would just absorb a customer base, or some type of technology that we liked that we wanted to integrate.
Right. And you did your IPO in 05, right?
December of 05.
05. And what was the driver for that? Was it your investors, or did you really see that this market was taking off and SaaS was taking off and you wanted to invest there?
Yeah, it was a combination of we wanted cash for additional investments and acquisitions, and really for us, because we went early, our trailing revenue was 28 million when we went public, which at the time made us one of the smallest SaaS companies to go public. There was one that came out ahead of us, Website Story, that was also small, that let us know it could be done. But the other thing we wanted besides cash was brand and national visibility. So a lot of people were still learning about PR and automating PR, and we felt like being a public company would help us get our name out, which it did. I mean, it was a good, from 2005 through 2009, when the economy really went bad, it was a great run.
And why was it a great run? Was it because you were able to offer, more of an ROI than a traditional PR agency, or what were the sort of macro business drivers that led you to grow like that?
Yeah, I think, the reason it was a good run, like all good runs have a few things in common. One is your company's growing, and your valuation is expanding. So whenever that happens, it's going to be it's a good run. And we went public at $9, and right before the economy crashed in 2009, I think we peaked at about $40. But underneath that, fundamentally, there's got to be a business reason for it. And for us, it was the ROI associated with PR. Even today, right? Anybody who's starting a company or growing a company, PR, public relations, is still an important aspect of that. Everybody's trying to get publicity of one kind or another, visibility online, brand awareness. So we just happened to be there at a time where that was moving from doing things with spreadsheets and paper clippings to doing it with databases and electronic monitoring. The rise of social media, also contributed at some point, to making it probably a bigger story. But we were fundamentally we were providing a software package that made it easy for people to build relationships with the media, send communications to the media, monitor their news coverage, and get brand awareness.
And you had never run a public company before, right? So what were sort of the surprises, both good and bad, with running a company that's under the spotlight all the time?
So the only, I remember in the early days I would get asked a lot, once we went public, what it was like, and was it a pain, especially Sarbanes-Oxley had just come onto the scene. And, for me anyway, the answer is simple, and it gets back to if you're on a roll or not. If you're growing, if the company's growing and doing well, it's a lot of fun. That was one of my 5 phases. Was I had the bootstrap, the venture capital, the public company, and I had the turnaround, which is what we did for probably the last 2 or 3 years. So when things are going really well and you have a company that's growing, it's not bad at all to be a public company. It's actually kind of fun. When things aren't going well, or you change your strategy, and you're going in a different direction, and you're in transition mode, it's not fun at all.
Right.
It's bad. You're doing everything in the public eye, and everybody's got an opinion, and everybody wants to let you know what that is. Mm-hmm. So, and it's true also what people say about when things are going well, everything's great, and when things aren't going well, the quarterly focus just becomes really intense. And it's not the best way to run a company,
Right.
Because you're just worried about what's gonna happen in the next 3 months, instead of what I always used to say call the old days, where you're really just focused on building great products and making customers happy.
So you guys were cruising along, right? And then hit some road bumps, and then it became a turnaround. But can you talk a little bit about how some of the roadblocks or bumps in the road you hit, and then what you did to get out of it, and then culminating with this week's exit?
Sure. So we cruised along. We went public. We cruised along through 2009. We were growing, 30% plus in 2008, and went into 2009, the down economy. Our growth dropped to about 5%. And we kind of sat back in 2009. We were now $100 million in revenue. And we knew it was obvious that a lot of it was macro. We saw, in literally when, who went out of business? Was it Lehman or no?
Lehman, Bear Stearns. Yeah.
Once, like the minute that came on Squawk Box, the next day our close rates went down, our renewal rates went down, everything just changed overnight. But at the same time, the PR space, while it's still really interesting to a lot of companies, we knew it was probably not going to be a big enough market for us to remain a growth company beyond $100 million in revenue.
Were you the dominant player at the time in that space?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Right.
Probably the next closest competitor we had was a company called Cision, which is now going to be a part of Vocus. But while we went from 0 to 100 million, they went from 300 million to 100 million. So,
wow.
I think we were the dominant player, and we looked around and we said, this is going to be more of a 5% a year growth company. We looked at the marketplace. We saw what was happening with digital marketing, which was in 2009 was on the rise. Right, you had this huge change in buyer behavior, where basically consumers were taking control of their own buying, and they were going out and doing research on the internet as a prelude to buying stuff, and all the marketing dollars were starting to shift from offline to online, and we thought PR was kind of tangential to that. We had already built social tools and other things that we thought would translate well, and so we really made a decision in 2010 to move beyond PR into the broader cloud marketing space. And that was really the transition that we started to go through. Now we had to go back to Wall Street and say, hey, we're going to we're taking earnings down because we're going to invest. We're going to take up this profitable PR business that we have, and we're essentially going to do a startup marketing business. And we're going to spend $20 million against 0 revenue for the first year. And so when you do that as a public company, your investor base turns over, and that's kind of what we went through in 2011 and 2012 and 2013. So I think, and that transition is still happening today, although towards the tail end of that, we had a number of companies that approached us that thought it could be done better outside of the public eye. And
the transition itself, or everything?
I think the transition itself. So that's really how the whole kind of go private thing started to bubble up. And we looked at it, and the investors saw the same thing that we did, which is we were investing money for future potential in the marketing business and in the PR business. So we weren't running to do that, to do the go private option. At the end of the day, we ended up with a premium on our stock price. The closing day was about 50%. And if you look at the weighted average trading over the previous 6 months, it was probably closer to 70%. Mm-hmm. So we were essentially getting paid for the investments that we had made, and some of the future potential on the table. Ended up being a good deal, for shareholders, and we went for it.
Right. Did you guys, hire a banker and shop the deal, or did GTCR just show up and say?
No, we were. If you read the many legal briefs, because whenever you do, I think 94% of public companies that go private get sued.
And why is that? Is the price is too low, or?
Well, the real reason is, the real reason that 94% of companies get sued is because, there are law firms that specialize in that.
Really?
And the basic concept, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal a couple months ago on this, but basically the strategy is you sue the company that's going private, and you try to get injunction to stop the deal from happening, which leads to a settlement typically of $300,000 to $400,000, and it's people now, it's like baked into the deal, and there's a process for it.
So there's a line item for settling lawsuits.
Yeah.
As part of the budget.
Now we actually. We only ended up getting sued by one company, which was actually pretty remarkable. But to answer your question, I think part of that is, so we went through a process where we did hire a banker, we hired Stifel, and we took the inbound demand that we had and we turned it into a slightly more formal process, and we ended up reaching out to 26 companies, both PE firms and strategic buyers, and so there ended up being a process where a bunch of different buyers were involved, potential buyers.
And how did you guys select GTCR? Was it price, or was it more than?
Yeah, it was mostly, for a public company in an all-cash deal, most of it just nets down to price, because this is for. Right, it's not, I didn't sell the company, the shareholders sold their shares in the company. The shareholders accepted the offer, the tender offer from GTCR, but it's mostly price. There are some other deal terms, but it was the best price and the best terms.
So I know you're no longer the CEO there. Are you an advisor, or can you talk about the future of Vocus as a private company?
Sure.
Now?
I can talk about it from the outside looking in now, but GTCR bought Vocus, and they bought our number one competitor, Tysons.
Right. Is that a simultaneous transaction? It seemed
pretty much.
Okay. Were they contingent on each other?
At some point they probably were, but they weren't closed simultaneously. Right. So I guess I would say no. They ended up buying. It's complicated. This will probably be a case study for somebody. So I think they're now a 72% owner in Tysons, and Tysons is a Swedish company, and so it's apparently going to take a number of months to take care of the last remaining minority ownership, but. They ended up buying both, and they're going to put the two together. It's a fairly classic kind of PE play. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it at some point along the way. I'm more interested in growth. That's what I've done pretty much my whole career. And I wasn't really interested in kind of doing a 5-year cost-cutting strategy. So we talked about the transition, and you can't have two CEOs,
right,
or two CFOs. So they said, what do you want to do if you're going to be leaving? How do you want the transition to go? And I said, the shorter the better. And we closed on Friday, and I left on Monday. So. And it's nice. It's clean.
How do you feel though? 22 years. This is like a child to you, right? You saw it grow up, and did you have any sentimental kind of attachment with this? Or
I mean, I'm going to miss everybody. I made a lot of great friendships there, and I'm going to miss a lot of the people that are there. But you go through all of these phases. They say that taking venture capital is the first step on the way to selling your company. So look, I mean, along the way, we took venture capital. I sold chunks of it. We went public. At some point, you'd make that transition from, in the early days, it's your company, and it's all about the product that you're creating, and you have that really close connection with all your employees and your customers, and you move further and further away from that as the company grows. So I feel more at the end, just like a hired CEO, than I do as kind of a co-founder. And every project has an expiration date, so I'll miss the people, but I'm kind of excited about doing something new.
Right.
Although I have no idea what that's going to be.
Well, I mean, the PR industry, the marketing industry. What do you see for the future of that industry? There's been so much change with technology, and you guys have sort of been at the leading edge of a lot of it. I mean, where do you think it's headed?
I think it'll be around. I think it's going to be around for a long time. Again, I don't know that the PR space in particular is. I'm not sure that it's a growth industry, but I think it's a stable industry, and I think it's going to be a piece of marketing for companies forever. And whether it's done by clipping articles and sending press releases versus monitoring electronic websites and social media. I think the concept of interacting with the press and the public, there's no reason why that should ever go away. Some people would argue that it's probably, I think it depends who ends up owning social. And I think there's kind of a little bit of a tug of war going on right now between PR and marketing. So if PR ends up, getting a bigger hold on that, then it could actually be even more important.
I mean, strategically, it must have been challenging, right, to keep track of everything? Social, mobile, PR, marketing, content marketing. I mean, there's so many things moving, and everything's changing like crazy. I mean, how did you guys keep up with that?
I think that was one of the challenges for Vocus over the years was, we ended up. It really wasn't one cohesive thing. We ended up becoming a PR software company and a marketing software company. We did an acquisition in early 2012. We bought an email marketing company because we knew that was going to be critical to the marketing suite. But we ended up with a standalone small business email marketing company. So we kind of ended up with 3 companies at the end, and public companies and public investors, they don't like 3 things. They like one thing.
Right.
So I think that was one of the challenges, was kind of keeping up with the product roadmaps and the strategy for what ended up being kind of 3 different things. But on the monitoring side that you're talking about, I mean, that's one of the challenges. But if there's no challenges, then you have no company. You have no reason to create something if you don't have a problem to solve. So, but yeah, keeping track of everything that's being said everywhere about everything was one of the challenges, one of the problems that we solved.
Right.
Which is why people wanted the product.
Right. So talk about, if we could, a little bit about building a sales team for a SaaS business. We had Duke here last couple months ago talking a little about that. Joe Payne has talked about it. And what do you see as the key? And a lot of guys in the audience are running SaaS-based businesses. In order to be successful, right, in a B2B context, let's say, on a SaaS, which is what you were doing, what were sort of the top 2 or 3 things you would focus on?
Just out of everything around running the business?
With respect to sales, SaaS sales.
I mean, the first thing is, once you get beyond kind of a startup mode, or small, once you start to scale, so the first thing about sales, running a sales organization, is it's hard. So it's like there is no easy answer or quick fix. So it's hard. We ended up at the end of, we started to scale back in 2014. At our peak in 2013, we had 700 quota-carrying sales reps.
700?
Yeah.
Wow. All in North America or around the world?
At that time, it was North America, Europe, and we had an inside sales center in Manila.
Wow.
That bombed terribly. So, I'm not really sure. I think what I probably learned along the way for running a sales organization, it's all fundamentals. I mean, there's no way, you can't break the fundamental rules of a sales organization, which is you have to have a good product, you have to have, sales reps have to be able to make their quota, and they have to be able to make the compensation that they should be making when they hit that quota level. And a lot of times, just those simple fundamentals are out of whack at a lot of places that you go to, right? You'll go in and people are, well, only 60% of my sales reps are making quota. And even if they make quota, they're making 20% less than they can make if they take a job over here at another company. Then that starts the turnover wheel, and it just becomes kind of a mess. So again, there's no easy answers. It's hard. Mm-hmm. But to me, it kind of starts with the fundamentals of making sure there's alignment between your product, your how much a rep sells, the cost of customer acquisition, and that they're making what they have to make at quota, and that the right percentage of your sales organization is making quota.
Right. So we will have some time for some questions, hopefully. But before we get there, I wanted to ask you what you're going to do now. I ran into you in New York a couple weeks ago. Were you looking to invest in some companies, or what were you?
At this point.
Let's talk about your wife has a big list, right? So you're going to do some traveling, and then after you do all that, what are you going to do? You're a young guy. So.
Yeah, well, I was a lot younger the first time. When she built the travel book, we had no kids and we were newly married. So now I have 4 kids that are, so I don't know that there's a ton of traveling because they're in all kinds of activities. But, the only thing I've decided is I'm not ruling anything out at this point. So beyond that, it could be anything from, an accelerator to a taco shop. But I don't know. I'm gonna, I'm not setting aside, even though a lot of people have advised me, I'm not setting aside a time period to do where I'm committed to doing nothing. But I'm not in any big hurry, and I just want to talk to a lot of people. I started doing that today. It's always interesting to hear people's stories, and kind of find out what else excites me and what else I want to do. I do think the area, I know there's been a couple tries at kind of an accelerator for the area that haven't worked real well. There's some shared space stuff, an incubator type space, but we don't really have kind of a Y Combinator on the East Coast. So that's something that has always been intriguing to me. We don't have a Silicon Valley, but there's a cluster of tech here, and a vibrant tech community. So I don't know.
Right.
Not sure. What did I tell you 2 weeks ago? It's probably whatever I told you probably changed.
Right. We were nervous that the deal wasn't going to close, because then we'd be wouldn't be able to talk so openly.
Yeah.
But
it's all done.
Yeah. Was there anything that you saw, or any technologies? Because for 22 years you've been in one sort of vertical market. Now your horizons might be opening. Is there anything that you're passionate about?
I haven't, I walked into our CTO's office every other day. You got anything? He's like, I don't know, I don't have anything. So we haven't really come up with any ideas. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff out there now. So I'm kind of tracking the iBeacon space. I don't know if anybody's looking at that, which is kind of intriguing. It's a great time to be in software and technology right now. So there's a lot of interesting things happening.
Yeah.
I'll probably shy away from. Most of the people I've talked to, I know there's some in the room here, that are in venture capital. have dissuaded me from doing that. And then I come back around and I say, well, what about angel investing? And they're like, that's even worse. So, I don't know.
Right.
I think I'm too impatient I served on some technology boards on the area, and I don't know that I have the patience for that because I just want to, I just want to jump in and take it over. So I don't know if I'm ready to do that.
Right. Interesting. I think we have some time for some questions if anyone in the audience has questions. Dennis? I'll repeat the question. Go ahead.
Who had the greatest influence on your life other than your parents?
So the question is, who's had the greatest influence on your life other than your parents?
I never have a good answer for that. So, I don't know that there's, I guess I don't have any one person. I don't know if that's good or bad. I had a couple, my first bosses that I had in the Air Force had a lot of influence, I guess, on my work ethic. I had a number of my board members at Vocus, I think had a big impact on helping me learn along the way. I mean, I think one of the things is probably the most unusual. I mean, our story, it's a great story. I know it doesn't happen every day. But I think probably one of the most unusual aspects of it is, I was there through all 5 phases of it. And to do that, I had to learn a lot along the way from different people. So probably the board that we have also was unusual. We went public in 2005, and other than one of the venture guys that dropped out, the board remained the same. So, we had a bunch of people that just really loved what we were doing and wanted to stay together and work together.
By the way, did Edison know that you had no cash in the bank when they gave you the money?
No, only after
they found out after?
Yeah.
What'd they say after? Were they?
I remember the managing partner, and it was only, again, by today's standards. I mean, we got our A round was $2 million, but we wired the money. We were high-fiving. We could make payroll, and I got a call 5 minutes later from the managing partner, and he said, please don't tell me you put our $2 million into your regular checking account that's not earning any interest. And I was like, oh, no, we're off. We hung up. We're like, hey, we got to put this money into an interest-bearing account or something. So that was our A round.
Interesting. Bob London.
This is great. Great stuff. I have a question. Is there, of the many kind of different phases you went through, is there one point where you look back, I don't even know if you're kind of the person that looks back, but you look back and say, wow, if we had just done this a little differently, or if we had taken a step back at some point?
So the question is, has Rick, looked back and had some, thoughts about what if he had done some things a little differently? Would things have turned out a little better?
Yeah. Yes. And again, what you typically find is when things go great, you're typically not looking back and asking that question. So I would say through 2009, I would say no. Everything was great. We were on a tear. I think the transition to marketing, which was tough, and ultimately kind of led to our decision to go private. I think I look back at that and say, hey, should we have just stayed focused on PR and tried to stick it out through the bad economy? Should we have stopped focusing so much on growth and focus more on profitability, which is what the PE firm's going to do to create value with Vocus now. So again, I think I've looked back at probably the tougher at that transition time and questioned whether or not we did could have done stuff differently, which some amount of that is healthy, I think, for learning, and then too much of that's probably not healthy.
Mm-hmm. Idris?
Was there kind of a direct correlation with your ability to stay strategic as opposed to tactical with success, the ups and downs of the business? So, for example, the more strategic was it the case where the more strategic you were, the better things got or the better things were? the more tactical you end up getting dragged out of the business, the negative.
So the question was there a correlation between Vocus's success and Rick's being strategic rather than tactical?
So, I mean, you have to make that transition to go from 0 to 200 million. And I did. So I guess there was a correlation because, I had to let go of the tactical stuff at each phase to continue the growth. But the key to that, and again, like one of the questions I know for today is like advice. And I mean, you guys have heard at all these conferences and so many other events. I mean, I think a lot of the advice has been dispensed. It's always interesting sometimes to hear the stories behind it, but that the piece of going from tactical to strategic, it's all about the people. It's that, and like when you have the right person, it's easy to let go of the day-to-day. And if you have the wrong person and you're getting dragged into then you're getting dragged into the tactical, and you have the wrong person. The last role that we filled was the product role. So, typical co-founder, I helped design the first product and led the product roadmap. And I did, in the early days, I did everything. So I went out and did the first 200 demos. So I had to let go of sales, I had to find a sales executive that was better than me, and then I could let go of it. And product was the last piece, because that's really tough when you're an entrepreneur that's created the product. That's a tough one to let go of. And, funny story, we had this company that we competed with for about 10 years. It was called Biz360. It was an analytics company in the PR space. And the CEO called me from time to time to try to sell us that company and other companies that he started. And he called me again in 2010. He had started a company called Engine 140 that helped people build their brand on Twitter, which was perfect, for what we were doing. It was pre-revenue. And, I said, the tech is okay, but I don't know that we're going to use it, but we'll buy your company if you'll reload from the Valley out to Beltsville, Maryland, and run product for us. And, by some stroke of luck, he agreed to do that. It's Yuman, who I think you know, Yuman Sang. And so he moved out here and became our chief product officer. And that was kind of the last one. And I was like, here you go. And, I get a peek at the product roadmap every, 4 or 5 months, and, tell them that shouldn't that field be on that side, every 6 months. And that was kind of it.
Yes, Bernadette?
So congratulations, fabulous story. Thank you for sharing it with us. Each of the 5 stages you went through could have been an exit, or at least starting at stage 2. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I always ask them, what is your exit? Because I want to know, are they focused on a goal? So I'd like to learn from you, how important is it to focus on a goal? How do you manage the changes of goals? And did you manage those consciously, or was it opportunistic?
So the question was that Rick has been through 5 stages of his business, starting with the mom and pop business, and then culminating with the sale. And Bernadette was saying, at what point, because at each stage of those 5 stages, it's potential exit. So how was Rick conscious or not so conscious about that, as well as, am I getting it right? Yep. As well as, was he conscious or not conscious about running the business versus exiting the business?
So I guess I'm not smart enough to plan that kind of thing, the 5 stages over the 20 years. So for me, it really wasn't planned like that. I mean, I was just, again, like a lot of people that are running companies, we were just focused on building value, building a company and creating products, solving problems, and growing the company. And those things kind of naturally fell into place along the way. On the exit side, I mean, I typically find, it really usually boils down to one of 2 things, which is either just things are going really well and somebody comes along and makes you an incredible offer that you can't turn down, that's probably like an Eloqua maybe. And then the other scenario is probably more like ours, where you've hit one of these transition points, and you got another X number of years for this next phase. That's going to be a lot of hard work, and somebody comes along and offers you a really good price, and you take it, which is what happened to us. So I didn't really plan the phases though.
So you were focused on running the business and growing the business, even though the first phase you had an exit opportunity. Did that ever stay in the front of your mind that, I'm always for sale kind of thing, or just, did you focus?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I shouldn't say everybody's for sale, but we didn't think about it a lot. But yeah, I mean, if somebody would have come along and made us a great offer. Now, there are other companies, right, like, who are some of there's Snapchat, who don't want to sell for, what was it, $3 billion or
crazy number, yeah.
Because they just want to build that business and they're not going to sell for any price. That wasn't me.
Right. Yes, Chad.
I applaud the vision and execution that you have in your business all those years. And you mentioned iBeacons. I'm the best in it. I was on Madison Avenue this week in New York, a very high growth retail that we have a solution that we're working with. It's amazing to me. I'm just interested in your work. What could do there?
So the question is about iBeacon and where Rick sees that whole ecosystem going.
It's early. I mean, it's early. I think only because most people I talk to today, even in tech and software, the response is usually, "Yeah, I think I've heard about that. Tell me some more about that?" So it's actually one of the things that when I kind of got onto it about a year ago, I thought would be hugely talked about, but it hasn't been. So, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people typically focus on retail as the main application. I think there's going to be a lot of different applications out there. The baseball stadiums, I think, are now all implementing iBeacons, right? So you can basically, wherever you walk if you want to get a hot dog, you just pick up your phone and they know where you are down to like 1 foot. And they can direct you to where you can go to get a hot dog and give you an offer for 50 cents off on your Coke.
Interesting.
So,
right.
It's early days though, I think, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
Yes, are there a couple of product mistakes that we made along the way that you could share? Maybe give us a little bit of your thinking as to why they were mistakes?
Right, so Chris with Public Relay, who you're familiar with probably, had a question about some tips. Have you made some product mistakes in the past, and how would you sort of navigate that?
I think we made our fewest mistakes. I mean, we made plenty of mistakes. I think we made our fewest mistakes in product. Again, I think the culture of the company.
Is that because you were running it originally?
We had a phenomenal.
Because you're close to it.
No, we just had a good process for product, and then we ended up bringing Yuman in, who's one of the most talented product people. We had a phenomenal CTO. I spent, 1% of my time on R&D. I mean, our stuff, it just came out on time. It worked flawlessly. We moved to the cloud in 2000. We were one of the first companies there. I think we made our fewest mistakes in product. I think, and maybe this is tied to it, I think our positioning is where we made a big mistake. And when we went from PR into marketing, which is obviously an enormous space, a lot of companies doing really well, a lot of acquisitions happened in the space, ExactTarget and Eloqua and other people. When we transitioned into marketing, we started too low. We went after really more of small business and the very low end of mid-market, and just my opinion, but there's a lot fewer companies targeting small business that I think have reached success from a value creation standpoint. You got Constant Contact and Web.com that are doing pretty well now, but it's a much shorter list than the mid-market and enterprise space. And if you are going to do it, I guess the learning that we got out of all this is you have to go all in on small business. So it's really hard to do small business right? Which comes with you've gotta be like totally in the groove on your customer acquisition costs. Eventually, if you're going to really, sell lots of product at a small price, it's going to lead you to stuff like radio and TV. And it's tough to build an organization that can do that really well and go after the mid-market and enterprise deals. So I think our biggest mistake on product was probably that was more of who we built the product for. So I guess that's a product mistake.
So focus on your target market and then build the product.
Yeah, make sure you know who your target market is. Try not to have two totally different target markets.
Mm-hmm. Got it. We have time for maybe one more. Sure, Lyles?
Rick, really a question for those of us who all of a sudden find ourselves with time and resources on our hands. The social service sector could really utilize the kinds of products that Vocus has and doesn't. Right? They just haven't. Now that you're looking at the next thing, is there a cause or a civic engagement that where you've been involved, you can see yourself getting more deeply involved in?
So the question is there a cause that you're wanting to get more deeply involved in? And are you still with the BSO?
I'm not.
Okay, we were on the board of the Baltimore Symphony a few years ago, but what are your passions for community?
Yeah, that's kind of mixed in with my list of all the different things I'm considering. I think I'm still an entrepreneur at heart, so if I were to do something in that world, I think I'd want to start it and run it. But I was on the BSO for a while. I was clean water was something that I've been involved in for a while that I find to be really interesting. I went to Malawi with a group called Water for People, and we were mapping clean water sources using mobile devices.
Interesting.
Which was kind of fun, but I don't know. That's one of the things I'm thinking about. I kind of think if I do something, I'd rather do something maybe more in my own backyard. Is kind of what I'm thinking, instead of solving problems somewhere else.
Great. Well, as I said earlier, Rick's got to go to his daughter's graduation, so
don't want to be.
Are
late
we on
for that.
time?
We're
with
on
that?
time.
Okay.
We're good.
Well, thanks for sharing your story with us. We're really honored to have had you, and we could just thank you. Great.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.